Hello everyone, please press subscribe, press follow, press the bell so you don't miss any new clips. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Author by Flying Alone. Audio novels by Novelist. Chapter 186, Swift Cloud Talisman. The auction continued. Following right after were a couple of paintings and calligraphy works, as well as some ornaments. They were not really important for martial artists, but could be used as a way to refresh the mind and a source of amusement. Besides these, there were also some martial arts and cultivation techniques. However, these tended to be too low in grade, and so did not get a very good price. After about half an hour, bidding began for the second foundation building pill. The atmosphere immediately became fired up, and not only did the bid very quickly exceed 10 million, the final price was fixed at 15 million, almost 50% higher than the first pill. The expression on the eldest imperial prince's face turned a bit ugly. If things went on in this manner, then it was really possible that he may not be able to buy even one foundation building pill. He thus secretly made his decision. He would try his absolute best to get the third foundation building pill. When Ling Han saw this, he could not help but shake his head. He believed that, with the accumulated emotions from the earlier 2 rounds of bidding, the third foundation building pill would definitely go for an astronomical price and become a minor climax of this auction. Everyone, the next auction item are these 3 Swift Cloud Talismans. The auctioneer drank a sip of water to moisten his throat and once again began to announce loudly, "These are 3 Swift Cloud Talismans. If one attaches onto their body, it will increase their speed by 10 times at most, and the effects would last for about 10 minutes. His eyes swept over the surrounding people. According to the estimation of the appraiser of our pavilion, the higher your cultivation level, the less the speed increase would be. A martial artist in spiritual pedestal tier would be able to increase their speed by only about 2 times, while a martial artist in element gathering tier can increase their speed by 10 times. It has no effect on one in flower blossoming tier. A martial artist in flower blossoming tier could soar to the skies, so it was natural that there would be no effect. And the higher one's cultivation level, the faster one would be, so it was natural that the lesser the speed increase would be. This was understandable. Ling Han could not help but become interested, and sat up straight. This, however, made Hu Nu very displeased, because she had to change her position on his lap. Spirit talismans could be taken as a different kind of spirit tool, as they were also similarly engraved with the martial intent of a martial artist. However, the material used to sustain the martial intent was a one-use item. Once a talisman was attached to one's body, it would begin working, and this was an irreversible, unstoppable process. Even if you used it for only a short while, its effects would end only once the talisman had been completely expended. However, spirit talismans were far harder to create than normal spirit tools, because unlike spirit tools that needed the user's own origin power to activate them and would not be activated if the user did not have enough origin power, spirit talismans did not have this problem. Once it was attached to your body, its effects would definitely be activated without exception. Of course, some spirit talismans that were too dominating and, with the installation of a terrifying amount of power into the user's body, could actually shatter the user's body, were nothing too rare either. These 3 spirit talismans, he decided he wanted them. Firstly, he could study the martial intent of these spirit talismans, and secondly, they could give him a speed burst of 10 times his usual speed. This, for the current him, was very significant, and may even save his life in the future. For Ling Han, as long as he was alive, he would be able to perform miracles, and would be able to get his own back. The 3 Swift Cloud Talismans will be auctioned off all at once. The base price is 5 million, the auctioneer announced. The base price of 5 million was enough to compare to the base price of a foundation building pill, and it was obvious that in the eyes of the Spirit Treasure Pavilion, they were also an extremely rare, precious item. The reason why they were not left till the end of the auction was most likely because the pavilion feared that everyone would spend all their money on the foundation building pills. 5,100,000. Someone placed a bid, but the increase in price was not very high. in the imperial city, who dared to commit murder. Thus, the price of the Swift Cloud talismans was far below their estimated price. After all, members of the great clans need not go out and risk their lives and would still be able to get enough resources for cultivation, while those who came from a commoner background would not be able to produce 5 million. 5,200,000. 5,300,000. The bidding went very slowly, and could not be compared to the earlier fiery bidding for the foundation building pill at all. 10 million. Right at this moment, a lazy voice was heard, yet it was practically earth-shattering, causing a numbness to everyone's hearts. What profligate young master was this that he would spend his money in this way? He's really trying to bring ruin to his father. Everyone turned their eyes to the private room on the 3rd floor. Quite a number of people looked surprised, because they had heard the eldest imperial prince's voice earlier on from there. This was still understandable. Who knows, perhaps the Spirit Treasures Pavilion thought that the eldest imperial prince had the highest chances to inherit the throne and so gave him a private room on the 3rd floor. But now, this voice was not familiar at all, so who could it be? Who was it that not only could sit in a private room on the 3rd floor, but could also spare such a shocking amount of money on his first bid? Sun Ziyan's eyes instantly narrowed. He naturally recognized that it was Ling Han's voice. This brat actually had so much money. True, if he did not have so much money, how could he be able to open up so many stores and compete with the Chen clan, even at a loss? There is now a chance for you to save the business of your clan, he said to Chen Yunxiang. The old man considered slightly, then quickly understood, and said, Ziyan, you mean I should compete in bidding with him and force him to spend more money? That's right. The two of you are now competing, and if that brat spends an extra million, that would mean you would earn an extra million, Sun Ziyan said coldly. All right. Chen Yunxiang gritted his teeth. I will go full force ahead today and fight to the end with that bastard. 11 million. He called out loudly. Hiss. The surroundings erupted in a clamor. 11 million was not the highest price today, but to spend so much money for 3 talismans that did not have much use, wasn't that a bit idiotic? Is it that old dog? Ling Han murmured. He naturally recognized Chen Yunxiang's voice. Then let me scare you to death. He raised his voice, and called out, 20 million. Pooh. Everyone choked. This was already not just a spoilt young master bringing ruin to his father, it was practically deranged enough to bring ruin to his ancestors. Not even the 8 great clans could afford to have such a character that would spend money like this, right? Young Master Han, do you really have so much money? The eldest imperial prince asked curiously. Though he knew that Ling Han could have a very powerful background, he did not think that the former could really produce such an exorbitant sum of money as 20 million so easily. That's all right. Doesn't your Imperial Highness have 20 million with you? Ling Han asked jokingly. The eldest imperial prince almost jumped up from his seat. This brat actually had his eye on his money. Though he did want to gain Ling Han's support, but if you were talking about simply giving him such an astronomical sum of money of 20 million, even he would break out in a cold sweat. Moreover, if he spent the 20 million on those 3 pieces of scrap paper, how was he going to bid for his foundation building pill? Young Master Han, don't joke around, he said, rubbing off the cold sweat from his forehead. Ling Han laughed, but did not explain, causing both Lu Yutong and Li Xichan to cover their mouths and laugh softly. This brat had merely concocted alchemical pills at the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion and had already collected 18 million in the form of observation fees. Moreover, he was the one who had concocted the foundation building pills, and their combined price would definitely total up to over 100 million. 20 million was merely a drop in the ocean. In a private room on the 2nd floor, Sun Ziyan smirked coldly and said, see, in just a few moments, you have earned 20 million. Raise your bid, continue the bidding. Meanwhile, Chen Yunxiang had erupted into a cold sweat. From that uncaring tone of Ling Han, it was as if 20 million was pocket change to him, but for the Chen clan, although 20 million was not an overwhelmingly large amount of money, they really did not have so much cash. They would have to sell off some of their property to get that amount of cash. If he continued to bid, he was really afraid that his heart would not be able to take the continuous shocks. But when he thought about Ling Han's forceful attitude, Chen Yunxiang gritted his teeth and declared, 21 million. At this, everyone finally understood. He was deliberately raising the bid. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 187, Credit Limit of 1 billion. The eldest imperial prince breathed out a gasp of relief. The other bidder had finally raised the bid and now, his 20 million was safe. Ling Han laughed, and said, "Old dog, if I suddenly changed my mind and decided not to continue bidding now, would you instantly faint from the shock?" Heng, that is only a mere 20 million. It's not a big enough sum of money yet that I would consider it seriously. In such a public setting, there was no way that Chen Yunxiang would abandon his face and cower, so he instantly calmed his heart and countered in a steady tone. "This esteemed guest of the third floor, are you going to make a bid? If you are not, then please do not interrupt," the auctioneer reminded. "Of course, I am. Money is merely an earthly possession." Ling Han smiled. 30 million. Pooh. The eldest imperial prince had just taken a sip of tea to calm himself down from such a scare, but when he heard the bid of 30 million, he instantly spat out the mouthful he had just drank. Thankfully, he managed to turn his head in the nick of time. Otherwise, if he had actually spat out the mouthful of tea on the female attendant waiting on him, then his reputation would really be completely ruined. Cough, cough, cough. He coughed uncontrollably, his whole face completely red, and said, "Young Master Han, did you just make a bid of 30 million? That's right. I assumed that, with the wealth of your Imperial Highness, a loan of 30 million would simply be a light drizzle to you," Ling Han said, laughing. "Drizzle your sister. That was 30 million silver coins we're talking about here, not 30 million drops of rain. Young Master Han, are you trying to kill me?" The eldest imperial prince asked grudgingly. If Ling Han was not able to produce that sum of money, would this debt fall on his head? That was very possible, since they were in the same private room. 30 million, just the thought of it caused the eldest imperial prince's face to turn black. He would be able to earn only 10 million after 5 years. Hee. Ling Han smiled, but did not explain. In the private room on the second floor, Sun Ziyan laughed loudly, and said, "This spoilt profligate master, how idiotic. He has simply dumped 30 million into the water just like that. Ha 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 ha. Come, continue the bidding." Chen Yunxiang also looked at Sun Ziyan with hidden bitterness in his eyes. "One word from you, and I have to increase the bid." That was 30 million here. If Ling Han really decided not to continue bidding, then he would have to sell off at least 1/3 of the properties under the Chen clan's ownership. By that time, he would be even less able to sustain Ling Han's malicious low-priced competition. 31 million, Chen Yunxiang said through gritted teeth. After making this bid, he could feel his heart was beating unusually fast, as if it was about to jump out of his throat. He had been alive for so many years, but had never spent 30 million in one go like this. No, he had never even spent 10 million in one go like this. Such a sum caused all the blood to rush to his head, and his face was completely red. It was possible that his head would explode at any moment. The eldest imperial prince once again let out a breath in relief. When he stretched out a hand to rub his forehead, there was actually cold sweat on his forehead. 30 million, not just him, maybe even the current reign emperor would have to consider seriously before spending such a sum of money. It was great that there was an idiot who decided to pick up the baton. He stared at Ling Han and decided that if Ling Han showed any hint of continuing to bid, he would act to stop the latter. Ling Han smiled. If he decided to stop bidding now, Chen Yunxiang would definitely want to die. This was a very good opportunity to destroy the Chen clan, but Ling Han did not want to miss out on those 3 swift cloud talismans because of this. 40 million. As swift as a sudden clap of thunder which leaves no time for covering one's ears, he made a new bid. With a pow, the chair under the eldest imperial prince's backside actually shattered. This was because he was too agitated, and lost control of his origin power that slipped out of his body. The loss of control over his origin power actually shattered a chair made of high-grade sandalwood. Young Master Han, your joke is too much. The eldest imperial prince shook his head. He was definitely unable to produce an astronomical sum of 40 million. Thus, if the Spirit Treasures Pavilion came forward forcefully to ask for their payment, he would only be able to draw a clear line between himself and Ling Han. Anyways, it was Ling Han who had made the bids, so of course, the money should come from him. He was feeling on edge here, while over there, Chen Yunxiang naturally gasped out in relief. This time round, he was not going to increase the bid anymore, no matter what. When Sun Ziyan saw this, a cold smile curled up the corners of his lips, and he said, "Mister, I'd like to ask, if one who had made a bid cannot produce the payment, how would the issue be handled?" Naturally, according to the rules of our pavilion, the offender would have his cultivation completely crippled, and not be allowed to step into the Spirit Treasures Pavilion forever. The auctioneer immediately replied, "Good." Sun Ziyan humphed coldly, and said, "I suspect that honored guest on the third floor is unable to produce this sum of money, and has been engaging us in a malicious price war all this while." The auctioneer's eyes grew grim. "Since young Master Sun has spoken such doubts, then let me go to confirm." He turned around and left, walking into the backstage area. The face of the eldest imperial prince instantly darkened. If they were chased out of here because of involvement in a malicious price war, what would be left of his reputation? Wait, this brat could not have purposely done it, right? Purposely causing public shame to him, and helping his third younger brother to clear all the obstacles in his path. He had just barely finished that thought, when he saw that the auctioneer had returned. The latter said, "I have just confirmed with one of the senior officials of our pavilion. That esteemed guest is definitely able to produce 40 million. Additionally, even if that esteemed guest does not have a single copper coin on him, our pavilion is willing to give him a credit limit of 1 billion. Pooh, 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 pooh. Everyone choked, and began to cough uncontrollably. A credit limit of 1 billion, what kind of concept was that? Ling Han did not have to spend a single cent and would be able to simply take home an auction item worth 1 billion, as the Spirit Treasures Pavilion would advance funds for him first. Such an honor, would even the clan heads of the 8 great clans be able to enjoy this honor? The eldest imperial prince was gaping widely in shock, a powerful astonishment in his eyes. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion looked too highly on Ling Han, didn't they? They not only gave him the use of a private room on the 3rd floor, but even gave him a credit limit of 1 billion. When he thought about it, even he felt extreme envy at such priority treatment. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "Since my wealth is confirmed, then to be fair, your wealth should be confirmed as well. I am also suspicious whether you two are really poor and simply engaging me in a malicious price war." When these words were heard, Sun Ziyan and Chen Yunxiang's expressions instantly changed. They were definitely unable to produce 30 million in cash. "Heng, I am a member of the Sun clan. So how could it be possible that I would not be able to produce a mere 30 million? Sun Ziyan said very forcefully. "If these words were spoken by the clan head of the Sun clan, that's fine. But for a mere junior of the clan, being able to produce 3 million would already be impressive enough." Someone laughed mockingly. It was of course one of Sun Ziyan's rivals. "That's right. It must be investigated. Otherwise, it would not be fair." Another person joined in on the excitement. A young and quick-tempered person like Sun Ziyan would have naturally made quite a few enemies. However, most of them would waver in the face of the power of each other's respective clans and not push the issue. Thus, at this time, there were of course people ready to hit him when he was down. "Please cooperate, young Master Sun," the auctioneer said. Since Ling Han's wealth was confirmed, then it was natural that Sun Ziyan and Chen Yunxiang had to be investigated as well. Otherwise, it would not be fair. The most important thing in the auction was to be fair, and what everyone hated the most was a malicious price war. Immediately, someone from the Spirit Treasures Pavilion entered into the private room of Sun Ziyan and Chen Yunxiang. After a while, the auctioneer said, "From the results of our investigation, the total sum of cash that young Master Sun and old Master Chen can pay is 9 million, which is very far from their bid of 30 million. When these words were heard, quite a number of people smirked coldly. If they were not elites of spiritual ocean tier and had come specifically for the foundation building pills, who would actually have more than 10 million on them? This time, Sun Ziyan had really ruined his whole reputation. Sun Ziyan and Chen Yunxiang were immediately cast out of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Because it was Chen Yunxiang who had made the bids, and he did not have any form of cultivation at all, there was no cultivation to be crippled. However, there was no way that the two of them would be allowed to enter into the Spirit Treasures Pavilion again for the rest of their lives. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 188. Sky-High Price. Because there was a malicious price war involved, the previous bidding was naturally discarded. Ling Han once again made a bid, and managed to easily purchase the 3 Swift Cloud Talismans at 10 million. Practically no one made a counterbid, because they were all aware of Ling Han's wealth. He did not even blink and simply threw out a bid of 40 million like that, and what was even more terrifying was his credit limit of 1 billion. If anyone actually offended him, then when something that they wanted came up in the auction and Ling Han actually joined in on the bidding, who would be able to compete? Very soon, a representative from the Spirit Treasures Pavilion delivered the 3 Swift Cloud Talismans over. As for money, he naturally had no need to pay now. It would be the Spirit Treasures Pavilion who would be giving Ling Han money. The eldest Imperial Prince was both astonished and curious. Where had Ling Han gotten so much money from, and how had he gotten such serious attention from the Spirit Treasures Pavilion? He had naturally done his own investigation on Ling Han's background. Aside from that short time period shortly after his birth, this guy was a complete village boy. In the bounds of the Imperial City, the Ling clan did not even qualify as an actual clan. But Ling Han suddenly rose up, and his rise took more or less only about half a year. This was really a miracle that no one could see through at all. The auction continued. After a few unremarkable small items, the 3rd foundation building pill finally appeared on the stage in a glorious display. The eldest Imperial Prince finally decided to throw everything into the gamble this time round. However, there were many others who had the same thought as him, and very quickly, the bidding price of the alchemical pill was pushed up to the high price of 20 million. The eldest Imperial Prince could only stare and secretly regret how he had not decisively acted the previous 2 times. And now, he couldn't even get 1 pill with his 20 million. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion seemed to practically sell anything one could think of. Not just alchemical pills and decorative items, they also sold various ingredients, cultivation techniques, and martial arts techniques. There were even treasure maps mixed in. However, there were no spirit tools up for auction this time round. Otherwise, Ling Han would really want to get one of his own. Because the martial arts and cultivation techniques that were on auction were really too low grade, Ling Han naturally did not have the slightest interest. He was practically nodding off where he was sitting. Anyways, he needed not buy the foundation building pills at all. The 4th pill, the 5th pill, and the 6th pill were quickly auctioned off. As the number of foundation building pills became less and less, the price became higher and higher. The 8th pill was even auctioned off for the astronomical price of 28 million. That was more than double the price of the 1st pill. This caused that elite of spiritual ocean tier from the Li clan to delightedly laugh for quite some time. Though the price of 13 million caused him to feel heartache earlier on, when compared with the current price, he was naturally happy to have bought it for only that much. There was only 1 pill left. Without a doubt, the final bid of this last foundation building pill would definitely break through the price of 30 million. Gods know when there would be new foundation building pills again. 20 million. True enough, the base price of 5 million had just been announced when someone immediately placed the high bid of 20 million. It was natural that the last pill would be worth more than 20 million, so what was the point of wasting their time making small bids of less than 20 million? Ling Han could not help but clap his hands, and said, I like that kind of person, very straightforward. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan both covered their mouths and laughed lightly. Who would not like someone who would be delivering money to him? Meanwhile, the eldest imperial prince was slightly confused. He thought that Ling Han himself was a straightforward person and so admired that kind of person as well, and could not help but ask himself honestly if he were a straightforward person. If he was not, would it be very difficult for him to befriend Ling Han then? 25 million. There was quite a number of people with straightforward characters. Another immediately added another 5 million to the bid. 26 million. 27 million. 28 million. 29 million. It was as if the price of 30 million was a new level. After the last bid was shouted out, a silence fell on the crowd. For the moment, none made another bid. The publicly acknowledged price of the foundation building pill was at around 10 million, but because there was no shortage of buyers and no one actually willing to sell it, the astronomical price of over 20 million naturally came about. However, no one's money came falling down from the skies, so they naturally could not simply spend excessively. Moreover, aside from alchemists, who could actually produce a massive amount of over 10 million. Such an amount would definitely have been the collective savings of a party, so how could it be spent so thoughtlessly? The majority of time of martial artists was spent on cultivation, so where would they have the time to earn money? For example, in the Ling clan, there was a few hundred people working in businesses and earning money to support the few dozens of people in the clan who could ascend up the path of martial arts and would thus be able to protect the wealth of the Ling clan. It was precisely because they were spending the money of their clans or parties that it was unavoidable that they would hesitate, considering carefully whether or not they should spend such an astronomical sum. 30 million. Finally, someone broke the silence. It was an elite of spiritual ocean tier from a middle-class clan. For the 8 great clans, one more spiritual pedestal tier elite would equate to an additional source of peak military power and was very significant. However, it was not to the extent that there would be any real solid change to their power base. However, for a middle-class clan, if there was a spiritual pedestal tier elite in their ranks, that would definitely mean a complete transformation, and allow the clan to be on a completely different level than previously. Thus, middle-class clans were more desperate to get the foundation building pill, and were also ready to go to crazier lengths for it. 41 million. 42 million. 43 million. Finally, only 3 clans were left. The eyes of the representatives from these clans were all red and they completely looked like they were ready to throw everything away and spare no expenses just to get their hands on the final foundation building pill. Even after swallowing the foundation building pill, you would only have about 10–20% chance to break through. Why do the two of you have to compete so ferociously with me? One of them asked. Then, why won't Brother Ma allow me to have this chance? Another asked. This is a foundation building pill worth 13 stars. It's not just a 10–20% chance, but is close to 30%. The third person humped coldly. If you can't afford to make a bid, then don't embarrass yourself. Then let's continue. Finally, the price was fixed at 49 million. Everyone had already guessed that the last foundation building pill would definitely get the highest price, but the price that almost reached 50 million still caused everyone to be dumbstruck. That was how an auction was like. There was no need for too many rich people, as long as there were at least 2 parties willing to place bids, that would be enough. Just like how Ling Han and Chen Yunxiang placed competing bids for the Swift Cloud talismans, when it caused the price to soar all the way up to 40 million. It was only the fact that Chen Yunxiang was not able to produce so much cash that the earlier bidding was rendered void. Ling Han calculated for a moment, and could not help but feel a slight shock himself, because the 9 foundation building pills altogether were auctioned off for a price of 225 million. Even after the service charge of 14% was deducted, that would also be almost double the price of directly selling off one pill for 10 million. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan also calculated it and were shocked as well. Such an astronomical number was enough to compare to the annual total income of a great clan. Total income, not total profit. In other words, Ling Han had earned more than the accumulated earnings of a great clan for 1 year in this single day. Alchemists really earn too much money. But that would depend on the person as well. Aside from Ling Han, what other alchemist could concoct these 9 foundation building pills without having exploded a few dozen furnaces first? And if it was an earth-grade alchemist, did an earth-grade alchemist still need such an earthly item like money? If an earth-grade alchemist actually concocted an earth-grade middle-level or even high-level treasured pill, then even selling off the whole Rain country would not be enough. The auction this time round ended smoothly, and Ling Han went to the backstage to settle his bill. The eldest imperial prince naturally thought he had gone to pay the money for his 3 swift cloud talismans, and would have never imagined that Ling Han had gone to receive his money. Moreover, the sum that he was receiving was enough to cause even an imperial prince like him to stop breathing. Young Master Han, the 9 foundation building pills have been auctioned off for a total of 225 million, and subtracting the 14% service charge, as well as the 10 million that you have withdrawn in advance earlier on, there is still 183,500,000 left. Jia Boyun handed over a stack of monetary notes to Ling Han. So much money naturally could not possibly be paid in gold. He already knew that Ling Han was about to become a black-grade high-level alchemist, and could even possibly step into earth-grade, and so he used a respectful address for him, hoping that Ling Han could concoct an earth-grade pill that could help a spiritual pedestal tier elite to break through. Otherwise, with his status, there was no need for him to be so respectful to this extent. Ling Han smiled and received the money from him. He did not even spare it a second look and simply put it away. He knew that the other would not dare to embezzle his money. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 189, Contemplating the 10th Nucleus. As the auction ended, everyone naturally returned home. Those who had managed to buy items they liked were naturally happy, while those who had not went home sighing and shaking their heads. Ling Han, meanwhile, was the biggest winner of today, having received a massive wealth of close to 200 million. If this news was actually spread out, then there may actually people who attempted to rob him on his way back. If they actually managed to succeed, there would be no need to worry about money for the rest of their lives. Thankfully, there did not appear any such blind people. When he returned to Huyang Academy, Ling Han went to bed. There was not much difference between 100 or 200 million and scrap paper in his eyes, so there was no need for him to keep counting his money like some kind of miser. Early the next morning, he naturally woke up to cultivate as per usual. His advancement rate was too fast by now. He had just broken through to the 9th layer of element gathering tier 2 days ago, yet now he was already close to the late period of the 9th layer. There was only one more step left and he would be in the peak period, ready to attempt breaking through to gushing spring tier. Should I try out that? Ling Han pondered, after he was done cultivating. In his last life, he had ventured into a considerable number of historical sites, and had naturally managed to obtain quite a number of cultivation and martial arts techniques, as well as a few personal letters that he suspected had been written by an elite of Shattering Void tier. There was a certain possibility mentioned in these letters. 10th layer of element gathering tier. 9 was the utmost number of this world, so 9 was considered the top of everything in this world. The king of yesterday and tomorrow referred to the emperors of the mortal world. It was the same in the field of martial arts, whether it was from body refining tier or all the way to heaven tier, the 9th layer was considered the top level that one could aspire to. And from body refining to heaven tier, there were also actually 9 tiers. The last Shattering Void tier would break one's mortal shackles, and was the step that would allow one to shatter the void to become a god. It was a bridge that connected to the other shore, and could be considered as the evasive one. However, there was an ancient almighty character that had mentioned that, in fact, one could actually still cultivate to the extreme layer in every tier, until perfection. The notes that Ling Han had obtained only mentioned that it was possible to form the 10th origin nucleus in element gathering tier, break the limit of 9 and catch the evasive one and really obtain perfection. The benefits of such a thing were endless. One had to understand that after element gathering tier, what lay ahead was gushing spring tier, and in this tier, the martial artist would transform the origin nuclei he had into springs that gushed out origin power in his dantian. After gushing spring tier was spiritual ocean tier, which was to transform these springs into endless oceans of origin power. Spiritual pedestal, flower blossoming, spiritual infant, deity transformation, all the subsequent tiers were closely related to this. From this aspect, the element gathering tier was actually the foundation of one's path of martial arts, and had far-reaching consequences. Body refining tier was only to refine one's blood and flesh, bones and tendons, while only in element gathering would one open up his dantian, and could finally be considered as having officially stepped onto the path of a cultivator. As a result, to be able to reach the ultimate limits of a mortal body in element gathering tier and reach perfection would have benefits that would last for the rest of one's lifetime. The problem here was that ancient almighty person had only mentioned that it was theoretically possible but had not managed to accomplish it himself. It was because he had returned to consider this issue only after he had reached a very high cultivation level. However, time was irreversible, so he could not possibly return to element gathering tier to once again begin cultivating. There was a large lapse in the history of the martial arts of this land, and there was also a large number of alchemical pill formulae that had been lost in the passage of time. It was likely that some unknown massive catastrophe happened in the era of that almighty person. Anyways, his theory had never been spread out and known by others, not to mention attempted. It was thus lost in the pages of history, until the notes came to be discovered by Ling Han. For the Ling Han of that time, these notes naturally did not have much use. However, who would have thought that his body would have been shattered by the Black Tower, and his soul, after 10,000 years, would be reborn in the body of a young man, which gave him an opportunity to start again from the beginning. It seems like, in a mysterious way, this was destined. Ling Han pinched his chin, obviously a bit hesitant. Forming the 10th nucleus was nothing to play around with. 9 was the ultimate limit, and was an absolute balance. However, if he decided to push in by force the 10th nucleus, that would undoubtedly shatter this delicate balance, and could possibly lead to a terrible disaster. Otherwise, after so many generations of elites and geniuses, why had no one ever thought of the possibility of 10 nuclei, or even 20? This naturally showed how difficult it was to actually take this step, or perhaps even how impossible a feat it seemed. Forget it, Liminational reached the peak period of the 9th layer, then consider it again. Ling Han shook his head, and did not continue to waste his time pondering this issue. By afternoon, he received a piece of good news and a piece of bad news. The good news was that Mo Gao had come out of seclusion, and had successfully ascended to gushing spring tier. Teacher Mo, congratulations for breaking through. Ling Han sensed a powerful wave of origin power and immediately rushed over to Mo Jie's courtyard. True enough, he very quickly saw Mo Gao walk out of his house. Though he looked a little disheveled, his essence, energy, and spirit were shockingly strong. Ha 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 ha, after 10+ years of delay, I finally broke through, Mo Gao said a bit ruefully. I believe that, with Teacher Mo's intent focus on the art of the sword, you will be able to easily break through the obstacles on your path of martial arts and enter into an even higher cultivation level, Ling Han said, smiling. This was not an exaggeration on his part. With a sword heart that was almost formed, Mo Jie's path of cultivation would definitely be smooth and easy from this point onwards. As the saying goes, a great talent matures slowly, and Mo Gao would definitely experience a huge burst. Mo Gao smiled faintly. As a martial artist, how could he not desire to ascend to a higher cultivation level? It was just that when compared with advancement in cultivation level, he was more passionate about the art of the sword. Now that his sword heart was forming, and his cultivation level was also raised, he had nothing to be displeased about. Your cultivation. Mo Jie's expression suddenly changed and he pointed at Ling Han, shock filling his features. 9th layer of element gathering tier. He suddenly had a feeling like he was about to faint. When Ling Han had just come here, he was only in the 5th layer of element gathering, and just how much time had passed. Just barely a month, and this guy was already in the 9th layer of element gathering now. Most likely, it would not be too long before Ling Han would be able to catch up to and even surpass him. What a monster! Ling Han nodded, and said, the advancement in cultivation level is indeed a bit slow. He sighed. Poser. Even with his training in Sword Heart, Mogao could not help but want to curse. This brat was really too much of a poser. Get lost, he said irritatedly. Ling Han laughed loudly and left. Mogao had just broken through, so he needed some time to stabilize his position in the cultivation level. The bad news, meanwhile, was brought by Lu Yutong. Actually, this piece of news was expected, though it had come a bit later than he had predicted. Those clothing shops that Ling Han had opened had all been robbed or damaged the night before. Now, the doors were broken open, the clothes were either robbed or torn to pieces. Not one of them was in a state to reopen. Obviously, this was the beginning of the counterattack by Chen Yunxiang, or perhaps Sun Ziyan. Since the peaceful resolution had failed the day before, they had immediately started to act the night before. Most probably, they had used the power of the Earth and Water faction. After all, it was very easy for those hooligans to do this kind of job. Now what do we do? Lu Yutong asked Ling Han. Since the opponent is not willing to follow the rules, then we can also only resort to force. Ling Han smiled faintly. Lu Yutong was stunned, and said, you want to charge to the Chen clan? You can't. Sun Ziyan must have guessed that you would do so. The Chen clan would definitely be heavily guarded today, and there may even be Imperial Guards present. If you actually come to blows with the Imperial Guards, no one would be able to save you. The Imperial Guards represented the Imperial family, so there was no difference between coming to blows with the Imperial Guards and committing treason. Ling Han grinned, then said, since that grandson wants to play, then let's just join him in his game. Anyways, I'm quite free right now. Let's go to the Earth and Water faction first, and first deal with this group of lackeys. Lu Yutong was even dizzier at this, and said, the faction leader of the Earth and Water faction, Yang Tiandu, is in the Spiritual Ocean tier. So we have to go to the Heaven Military Hall first, Ling Han said with a smile. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 190, Force Sale. There were many lone cultivators in Rain Country, and they did not have any party behind them to support them. However, cultivation was a very expensive venture, so then, where did they get their money from? Naturally, through working for others. For example, they may choose to serve as guards for traveling merchants or collect bounties after killing some villainous characters or gather ingredients that their employer required. As time passed, there was a place and organization that was specifically formed for lone cultivators to get missions, and that was the Heaven Military Hall. Anyone could enter the Heaven Military Hall. One only had to register his personal information, and would be then able to obtain missions and begin his way to earn money. Of course, the Heaven Military Hall was even more welcoming of the wealthy to post missions here. It was a bit like the auctioneer's house. After a mission had been completed, the Heaven Military Hall would collect a portion of the rewards as fee for their service. Lone cultivators, as their name suggested, usually moved alone and were thus like a sheet of loose sand. However, if they actually managed to cooperate with each other, they would become a party that should not be taken lightly. Thus, in the process of the formation of the Heaven Military Hall, there was also involvement of the imperial family. They were not only able to take a share of the profits, they also sent out a large amount of manpower as surveillance to avoid someone secretly gathering these lone cultivators together to become a force that could threaten the authority of the imperial family over the country. Thus, the Heaven Military Hall has become more and more official, and there was an increasing government-approved quality about the place. However, there were still some things that were not appropriate to be registered on the records. There were some who would be receiving their mission requests in the underground, but that would mean there was no security provided. It was possible that the employer may not pay for the completed mission, or it could also be possible that even after completing the mission, there was no money received. One could only bear the risks on his own. There was only one rule in Heaven Military Hall: everything could be done if there was enough money. Ling Han went to the bank first to cash in his monetary notes, then headed towards the eastern part of the Imperial City. That was where the Heaven Military Hall was located. Lu Yutong followed at Ling Han's heels, a worried frown over her face. Though the Earth and Water faction had a bad name, as if they were detested gutter rats, the faction leader was an authentic spiritual ocean tier elite. If one wanted to oppose this kind of powerful character, there was definitely a need to at least get the help of one elite of spiritual ocean tier, or perhaps even a few. Once one managed to reach the high level of spiritual ocean tier, would a martial artist still need to be a mercenary? He could simply join a powerful party and take the position of an elder and would only need to cultivate every day. It was even fine if he decided to laze around and not cultivate; he only needed to step out and take action occasionally whenever he was needed. And what was the point of hiring a few hundred gushing spring-tier martial artists? Against an opponent in a high layer of spiritual ocean tier, they would only be mowed over in a single move. Hu Niu, meanwhile, was completely carefree, running all over the place, playing and laughing. "Damn girl, where's your guardian?" An angered voice was heard, attracting Ling Han's attention. The voice belonged to a sturdy man who had a street-side stall, and who was currently shouting angrily at Hu Niu. Apparently, Hu Niu had bumped into some of his merchandise, but that was also because he himself had taken up too much space, and had placed his merchandise all the way onto the street, making it unavoidable for those who wanted to pass to actually have to circle around his stall. The little girl, due to a moment of inattention, bumped into a few of his items. Hu Niu was naturally not easily bullied. She bared her teeth and glared back at the sturdy man, her ferocious nature on full display. Ling Han walked over, rubbed Hu Niu's head, and asked, "What is it?" "Your little girl made my things fall over, so you must pay the compensation," the sturdy man said, his stare fixed on Ling Han. While he spoke, 4 similarly tough-looking men stepped out behind him. They all crossed their arms in front of their chests, smirking coldly. Ling Han understood now. That man must have deliberately arranged his merchandise in such a way that they would cover a large part of the street. Once anyone accidentally bumped into his merchandise, he would take advantage of the opportunity and jump out immediately to ask for compensation. The other 4 men were naturally his accomplices, and were there to add pressure to his threats. Ling Han's eyes swept over the merchandise that the man had laid out. They were all counterfeit items. Some of what looked to be ginseng was actually mere carrots that had been joined with the top of a ginseng root. Some gold items were worthless, as their insides were filled with brass, and the joint was very obvious, so how could they possibly deceive his eyes? He was just about to give these 5 people a little lesson when his eyes were attracted by a strangely shaped rock, and he could not help but ask, "What is the price of this rock?" The stall keeper was about to fly into a rage, but when he saw that Ling Han seemed interested in buying one of his merchandise, he could not help but smile, and answered, "I'll give you a cheaper price, 1,000 silver coins." 1,000 silver coins. He's gone crazy from wanting money, hasn't he? That's right. That's just a piece of worthless scrap. Even if it was an excellent rainflower stone, or a heaven song stone, that kind of size would only be worth about 100+ silver coins. Hush. They're from the Earth and Water faction. You mustn't enrage them. They're always here bullying the locals, and no one will actually step out to handle them. There were some passers-by who could no longer stand by and watch and immediately spoke out in rebuke, but there were others who revealed the identities of the 5 hooligans and advised them to watch what they said. "Fuck, if you guys dare speak any more nonsense, I'll chop you all to death." The stall keeper glared and showed off a fierce expression. The 4 men behind him all smirked coldly. Those who had spoken up in rebuke shivered, and indeed, they did not dare to speak any longer. "Brother, this is an exquisite spirit stone. Just look at how bizarrely shaped it is. It is an odd item that has been naturally formed in this way," the stall keeper boasted. "I don't like it." Ling Han shook his head. After he found out that these people were from the Earth and Water faction, he had the impulse to play a terrible joke on them. Don't like it? The stall keeper laughed coldly. If you don't like it, then why had you asked about it? Are you trying to play around with me? It's too late now. Whether you like it or not, you'll have to buy it now. What a bully. How can he force a sale like this? Who asked him to be from the Earth and Water faction? In the past, someone had previously reported the crime, but when the Imperial Guards came, it was completely useless. Instead, the Imperial Guards chatted and joked around with him. At the side, there were some who had began exclaiming in rebuke about the injustice, but there were some experienced locals who revealed the truth of the matter helplessly. These local ruffians were completely secure, knowing that they had backing. Ling Han pretended to be scared, and asked, I'm not buying, are you going to beat me up then? Heng, this little girl pushed over a few of my items, and you wasted my time. If you buy this rock, then we'll forget all about the matter. Otherwise, hee. The stallkeeper gave a signal, and the 4 men behind him simultaneously pulled out a dagger each and began to play with it. The threat was more than obvious. Don't be hasty. Ling Han waved his hands hurriedly and said, I'll buy it, then. Good. The stallkeeper smiled coldly. When he saw Ling Han behaving so weakly and so easily bullied, his greed could not help but swell, and he said, the price has risen now, it's 2,000 silver coins. He glared fiercely at Ling Han, and asked, what is it? You don't want to pay. Here. Ling Han said as he handed over 2 monetary notes, each worth 1,000 silver coins. Ha 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 ha. The stall keeper laughed pompously. This brat had to be a fool from some rich family, he actually handed over the money so obediently. Is this rock mine, now? Ling Han asked, smiling. It's yours. It's yours. The stall keeper waved him off. He had discovered this rock in his backyard a few days ago. Because it was very weirdly shaped, and had a bit of ornamental value, he had taken it out to sell it. His initial motive was naturally to deceive some fool into buying it off him, but he never thought that he would actually be able to sell it off for 2,000 silver coins. Lu Yutong watched the entire scene and could not help but feel secretly confused. With Ling Han's ability, handling these 5 local ruffians was naturally as easy as a piece of cake, but why had he deliberately allowed himself to be fooled? Ling Han laughed and gave a light tap on the rock. With the force of his origin power, there instantly appeared a few cracks on the surface of the rock. He lightly broke the pieces apart, and as the crushed pieces of rock fell, there actually appeared a flicker of gold light from within. Everyone could not help but turn to look. End of the chapter. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao will be read in 5 chapters for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Please leave this sound novel and press subscribe, follow, and the bell so you don't miss any new clips as well. See you.